So to start with, have you come across this one, ECMAScript? Oh, okay. So ECMAScript is just his background, okay, because we've been listening to JavaScript and we are using the JavaScript in Lightning component, and even in Lightning component, in every release, they say they bring some standard features into Lightning component. So it's better to know the history of JavaScript. So ECMAScript is a standard body which actually dictates what the language should look like. And JavaScript is just one of the implementation of ECMAScript. If you see, there are there are so many other implementations like a Node.js and Tiny.js, and there are so many other JavaScript implementation which we may not aware of. But all we know is one, the very popular one, the JavaScript that's run in browser. Okay, we know only that JavaScript. The ECMAScript, like I said, is standard, and every year they publish a new standards. Okay, very latest one is ES6, and next ES7 is under a proposal. It still is not a standard one, but ES6 is the latest standard, and it's been is supported by all the popular browsers like Chrome, Edge, Opera, all the latest ones. And when you talk about if you talk about the browser design, like if you talk about any developer who really works on implementing a browser itself, they talk about they don't talk about like a JavaScript or something. They talk about these things like ES6, ES1, ES2, like that. So they always try to implement all the features outlined in this document, ES6 document. Okay, so it's good to know this term. Okay, that's fine in the terms of history. The last point, to our Salesforce, Lightning component is fully compatible with the ES6 standard. So if you read all the ES6 standard document, specification document, you can use any feature in Lightning component. It's fully compatible. So yeah, a JavaScript developer who comes from some other background, not Salesforce, like he can just come into Salesforce and just start work from day one because it's fully compatible with the standard. So next, let's see what's variables and functions. Even though it's basic, but I'm just going to get into some of the details and get into some nuances around that. Variables and functions, I would say, is like king and queen of JavaScript, because most of the time you work on some data that is variable, or you try to call a function or write a function which accepts some data and do something with that. Okay, so that's why I'm saying that variables and function is the king and queen of JavaScript. Even I would say that this is true for any programming languages. That's what I believe. So let's say for, how I see variable is like it holds any data. Okay, that's a general idea about in any programming language. It holds data, but the beauty of JavaScript, it also hold a function. You can hold a function in a variable and pass it around functions, and you can store function all the bits. So function also is like a data in JavaScript. And I have given an example here. You can see like these are the different types of data you can hold in variable, and you can hold even a function like this in a variable like this. Okay, the next point, like I said, function how function and data relates. Function accepts any data and return any data. Accepts any data and return any data. So that's the link. That's the link between function and data. Okay, that's what I have just outlined here. Accepts data, again it's optional. It doesn't need to accept data, and produce either data or function. Okay, a function can return data like this. Okay, or it can return a function like this. Okay, so I would say the function definition is like this: function accept data optionally and produce either data or a function. So this how you need to think, or you need to intercept the link between a variable and the data and the function. Okay, So then comes scoping. So scoping is very important. For basic JavaScript, you don't need to know about scoping. But when you write like a complex JavaScript code, when you incorporate too many library, more than one library at a time, you need to know about scoping. Okay, and when you go through any complex JavaScript thing, you need to be a master in knowing understanding the scope in detail. Functions, JavaScript have three scopes. Okay, local, function, and then global. Like I said, each function, okay, inside each function, you can access variables from three scopes. Local, as name suggests, whatever you declare inside it. For example, if you see the function, the D is the local because that's declared inside this function. Okay, and same way after this line, if you declare like a variable f something, for example, okay, so that f is a local variable because that's declared inside function. And then comes function scope. Some people get confused when you say function scope. They think that whatever declared inside the function, okay, but that's not correct. Whatever declared inside function is local scope. Function scope means whatever come outside of the function. See, this function d is right, its outside function is function c, function of c. Function of c's outside function is a function of b. Function of b outside is sum of a. So this function d has access to c, b, a. How come this has access? Because of function scope. Because of it's in the hierarchy, in this function hierarchy, it get access from the previous functions. So that's why these variables like c, b, a has function scope. Okay, that's how you are accessing this a, b, c, d. Okay, a, b, c you are accessing from function scope. Then comes global. So global is the one which you declare at the topmost in your JavaScript file. This is a very bad practice. Okay, I know when people starts developing in JavaScript at the starting stage, they declare everything at the first line. This is a very bad practice. I will tell why it's a bad practice, but that is a bad practice. They call that as a global scope. So declaring all variables in global scope is a bad practice. Okay, now I'll tell you why it's bad practice. See, you declare variable e, okay? You write this function. Then I write a library. In that library, I does exactly this one. I declare variable, sorry, it's a touch screen. Okay, I declare variable e equals Sankaran or something, and you include my script in your program. Okay, then what happens is this e and that e gets collided, and you will get either this value or that value depending on order of execution, order of linking. Okay, so that is the problem, and because of this problem, you should always avoid global scope. At least when you use other third party libraries or library from some of your coworker, you should always avoid using global scope. Okay, so I think you got a bit of understanding. Even if you get like a slight idea, that's fine, but in future you can get better idea. Okay, and in latest ES6 standard, you have two variable types, two ways of declaring variable. One is using var keyword, and the next one is let keyword. Now let's see what is the differences. See, in the previous slide, you have seen local scope, function scope, global scope. There is one important scope which is not here, but which is in Apex, Java, and all other C++, and all other programming languages. What is block scope? Okay, block scope means, see this if, right? If is a block because whatever you close with curly braces is a block. So inside, if you declare like variable myvar, in other programming languages, this myvar and this myvar is two distinct variables. Okay, but in JavaScript it's not like that. It doesn't have block scope. So what it does, Even though you declare myvar here, it doesn't declare. It just still points us to this one. So when you declare like myvar equals 2, what it does is it changes this value to 2. Okay, so this example print 2 here. Okay, and when it comes here, you would expect this thing to be 1 and you expect this to be 1. But what happens is because you overwritten, it also displays 2. Okay, is not there. Local scope, yeah, but yeah, local scope is not there. Yeah, you can't have curly braces and include a variable inside and expect that that is like a isolated pod. No, it's not isolated. It just mess up with the function scope. Function scope. This is called function scope. Yes, global scope or function scope depending on where your code is. Okay, so that's why that the main reason is where doesn't support block scope. Okay, that's why they brought this keyword let. Okay, if you if you put let keyword, it supports a block level. Okay, so when you use let keyword, it just sits within this block. So this one and this one doesn't get collapse. So you will not both, just the second one can be let, the previous one can be where. Yeah. Okay, so in this case what you have, what you get like 2 1 1, because inside 2 and 1, 2 and 1. Yeah, got it. Yeah, I have used in some places. So like I mentioned, I have pointed out each and everything whatever I used in the code. Then probably you have seen this keyword in a lot of places, and probably you also know what it is, but it's just I'm just pointing out from my point of view and my explanation. So this is like you see in other programming languages, it's a wide standard one. So this points to a pointer. Okay, even here this points to a pointer where it holds all the context variable. Okay, if you're inside a function, if you use this keyword, that this keyword points to local variables. Okay, so it works like this. if you if you are inside what is this function. Okay, and if you point this dot a, okay, this function has access to, okay, tell me, this function has access to all the variables, right? This global variables. Okay, so because it's a local, yeah, because it comes, yeah, because each function has access to three variables, local, function, global. This global, we have a variable, so this has access. Okay, so that's why we can use this dot a like this. So similarly you can even access this dot obj here. I haven't put, but you can access. So that's why it's called, this is called a variable which has access to all the context variable. Okay, so yeah, yeah, tell me. Yes, sorry. Yeah, yep, yep. Yeah, I will come to the next point. Yeah, so normally that's a novice use, like, okay, this points to the local variable, that's fine, points to all the local variables, that's fine. But you may wonder like, what's the use then? Okay, even though you can access all the variables without using this, then what is the use? It comes very handy when you want to use a function dynamically. Okay, because your function may use this dot something. Okay, but when you call this function, you can intelligently change that this value, and you can make the function work completely differently, right? Because you can dynamically change what's inside that this pointer, and you can make the function works completely differently. That's what it happens here. See what I'm doing, I'm calling this function. Okay, exact I'm calling this function by using obj parameter. Okay, in the obj parameter I have a as a custom. Okay, but this one is global. Okay, but I'm asking is call this function using this value, not the actual this. Okay, that's why it's changing. And you have two methods, call and apply. Don't worry, both works in the same way. Okay, all right. In our code I've used bind in some places. Okay, exactly, if you understand this concept, It works exactly like call and apply, but that's only one difference. In this case, when you use call and apply, it calls this method immediately. Okay, but in bind, what it does is it returns a function. Okay, see f dot bind, and I'm passing the object exactly like this, but it is not calling immediately, but it's simply binding and returning a function g, and then you can call them later on, laterally. Yeah, g is a function, and then I'm calling that function. So it's a two-step process. I explained this here. Similar to call apply function, except that it returns a function and doesn't call immediately. So it's a two-step thing. So where it will be useful is you have a function which is using this dot something, then you bind this function with one object, and then you have the function, and later on whenever you need it, you just call that. Got it? It's like a yeah, it's kind of similar like Apex. In Apex, how do you do? Like in the while we are setting the property, right? Property like attributes of the Apex class. Apex class, yeah. So we call it this while setting up, we call it this dot blah. Yeah, but we don't have very similar functionality like this. When you instantiate a class, then you pass in some value and then get set value. That is a class and then object, things like that. But this is, yeah, it's very similar concept. But here we don't have a class, we have a function, and this is a way of binding it. Yeah, but it's very similar, very similar. I wouldn't say same, but similar. Yeah. But see, even though it's similar, but in Apex you would have seen those things quite common. But you won't see this quite common. So that's why it's. So here, right, you are binding A with U. Yes. So whenever you want to, whenever you call A, U will return. Yes. Yes. Okay. That's a concept. That's a basic idea. But this is a very simple example. But this idea is same. But you would have seen in very complex scenarios, complex examples, like you'll be passing a big object inside a function. The output of it would be log console.log. Yep. Yep. O dot A. Yep. 37. Yep. Yep. F. Yep. G G H H. Okay, so F. What is the F function? F. Is it A? Yep. 37. G. So it will go to G. G. G is this where G is binding A with ZD. Yep. So it will console.log G function. For this function, the ZD will come out. Yep. So okay, got it. So, got it? Cool. Okay, then let's come to variable values. Okay, it's good to understand, like, okay, you have a proper values like number, date, and string, array, object. You have some proper values, no doubt about it. But there are some, uh, I would say, basic values which you need to understand, like what's the differences and things like that. Okay, first is not defined. Like in JavaScript, okay, if you try to access any undeclared variable, it throws not defined. Yes. Like this. Okay, so that's the first type. I mean, if you need to declare it before using it. Okay, but you don't need to declare. You can even assign. When you assign it, it accepts it as a declaration as well. That's one key, one tricky thing you need to understand. You need to remember. Yeah. You need to remember that. Yeah. The next one is undefined. So undefined is the state when you just declare, you just declare, okay, declare a variable for like this where b, and then it's not assigned anything. You didn't define what is this variable is. Either it's a string or something, nothing. We don't know anything about that. That state is called undefined. So I would say that this is the state of a variable when it's just declared. Okay. Okay. The next stage is null. So null is you declared something, okay, you declared as like a variable, like a string or array or whatever it is, then you did all your manipulation because that data could be large, like a array. For example, it could have like 1,000 elements. Then if you want just to erase those complete memory, then you need to assign that with null. Okay, then that's what it happens. Then there is a question. This is a very popular question among developers. What is the difference between undefined and null? Both means that it's not pointing to anything, right? So what is the difference then? The difference is you shouldn't use undefined at all. Undefined is used only by JavaScript at the initial time. When you declare the variable, it assigns you undefined. That is the only state it should have. All other times you need to use null. Okay, that's what I mentioned here.
So it just block the memory.
Yeah, it blocks the memory for both. If you, I mean, JavaScript doesn't stop you to assign, use undefined or null. You could use either. But as a good practice, you shouldn't use undefined at all. You should use always null, and JavaScript uses undefined only during the initial lifespan of a variable. Okay, then comes I would say the falsy value for a variable. For a boolean, having a false is a false,
Yes.
no problem. For a number, having 0 is a false value. Okay, for a string, obviously having empty string is a false value. For array, having nothing in the array is a false value. Okay, and for object, and I mean it's not empty, but there is a way of checking if it is empty or not. Okay, but that's one way. But normally, having nothing is again a false value. Okay, apart from this, it can have any proper value, proper date or whatever it is. Okay, but these are the basic standard. I mean, yeah, I would say that JavaScript defined values which a variable can hold. Then very important stuff, objects, Salesforce objects, sorry, JavaScript objects. And you also have a JSON. I know some people have confusion of how to call each and what's the difference between this. The first point is in JavaScript, I said that variables and function is very key. And I would say the next important thing is object, because you have seen like objects in Salesforce and the JavaScript core. Object is the one which holds variable and functions together.
Yes.
Okay, in Lightning component, you have a controller and helper, right? If you closely look at that, controller and helper is just on one object where you have list of functions. Okay, and also if you want to talk outside of Salesforce, even jQuery is the one big object. Okay, so next comes to JSON. So what is JSON then? It's actually a textual representation of JavaScript object. Okay, basically why it's been introduced is if you want to send the data from say JavaScript to like a third-party system, you can't send actual object because object is living inside a JavaScript memory. If in order to send that, you need an open format. Before this, they used to have open format as XML because XML is the only standard format it was supporting. And after JavaScript got quite popular, then they started with a new format called JSON. So it's nothing but a textual representation of the Salesforce JavaScript object. So JavaScript object is the pioneer for this. And inside JSON, there are a couple of important APIs which normally I use. The one is stringify and the parse. So stringify, what it does is it picks up the object and just text converts that to text format, and parse just the reverse. Okay,
Reverse. We generally use JavaScript to communicate with the server.
server, yeah,
Text is the universally accepted format.
accepted format. So we do like that. Okay, then object, this object, right, this API has few things, few, if I would say this object is exactly same as a map in the Apex. Okay, so you normally have pretty much very similar API here. You have keys which gives just the keys from the object. You have values which send all the values in the object, and also you have assign. Assign is nothing but very similar to concat. If you have two object and if you assign one to another, it just merge both and returns you a big object. I have used all these, I mean, I've used only
Yeah,
these three APIs. Probably you have seen these things.
Stringify extensively you have used
Yeah,
and key values, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, then comes string data type. And again, I don't want to talk too much about that. So that's why I have API here. So length, I don't know to even explain this, but length starts with split, replace, two uppercase, and index of. And there are tons of other APIs, but I have used only the six much in the code. Okay. Then array data type. Again, array is the second important most I've used. Again, you have just stop me if you have any if you don't clearly understand any API. Yeah, length push, you push it, then unshift, because push always pushes it to that end. If you want to push to the first, then you use unshift.
Unshift.
Okay, then pop, it always take the last value from the list. Okay,
Unshift.
unshift is used to push the value at the front. And push all, because if you have array and just push, you want to push everything once into your array at the end, then you use push all. Okay, then you have reverse. If you have a list and want to reverse it, you use reverse. And you have a map. So the use of map is, for example, you have 5 items in the list, and if you want to execute a function on each and every element, and you want to store the result from the function as an array, then you use map. For example, you have 5 items in a list. You want a new array which contains elements after multiplying 2 with each element in your original array. Then what you do, you write a function which multiplies the 2 with each element, and then you call that function using map on the original array. Then you end up, I'm sorry, multiply by 2, and then if you execute that line, you will get a map, you get a list which will have the multiplied value from each element from the original array. Okay, so map is very useful. I would say I also used it in so many places. Yeah, very, I mean, very shortened thing. Otherwise, you need a lot of code to do this. The map is really easy. Then you have a big list. If you want to slice it, use slice, split it, basically split the list. And the compared is the counterparty is, if you have two lists and if you want to merge it, use concurrent. Okay. The set is actually new standard. Okay, it comes in ES6, and set is again is the very same thing as an Apex one. You have it will accept only the unique items. Okay, if you put in duplicate items, it will remove it. Then obviously I've used only two API from that. One is the length, and the second one is I've used dot operator. It's called ellipsis operator. What it does is, yeah, ellipsis operator.
Ellipsis.
Yeah, what it does is it converts the set to an array. If you just put three key, dot and mention a set, and set variable, and then you assign that to an array, then it basically that converts that set to an array. It's a shorthand operator. I've used this in one place.
Ellipsis.
Okay, so now you understood like variable functions, all the scopes, everything, right? If you really understand all those bits, now what we are going to talk about should be very easy. Okay, the first one is anonymous functions. Anonymous function is the one which doesn't have a name. Okay, so probably you would have seen in so many places. This function is anonymous function because that doesn't have a name. Then comes callbacks. So callbacks is a technique. You pass a function, anonymous function, okay, to another function that invokes that function
This should be
at,
anonymous.
no, anonymous I've just explained. I'm explaining the callbacks. Callbacks the one you pass a anonymous function to another function, in this case set timeout. Then set timeout calls that function at some point. Okay, that's a technique. You call another function by passing a function, and that function calls that function later on.
Okay.
So that's called callback.
Got it.
Okay, I'm calling you now, but you call back with what I've passed to you. That's what happening here. This is a very quite this is a quite popular one, set timeout, where you pass in a function, it gets called after half a second. Okay. Then call self-invoking function. Probably you have seen this kind of structure. Okay, you declare a function inside a close parenthesis, and then you finish with parenthesis. This is called self-invoking function. What it does is declaration of anonymous function as well as invoking happens at the same time. Okay, there are some, I mean this, so you may wonder like what is the use of this? Okay, if you want to put your code inside function and call it immediately, why don't just put this code outside? But what could happen if you just put this outside? You may have like some variable declaration over here. Okay, if you put this code outside, then those declaration variable declaration comes to global scope.
Yep.
So global scope is a bad practice. So to avoid bad practice, you do like this. I hope you got that point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So the last one is recursive functions. I know this is a very general thing in programming languages. You call the same functions within the same function. Okay,
Okay.
you call it recursively. I've used it in a couple of places this technique.
Self-invoking function means we are doing it just because to avoid the bad practice. Global.
Which one? Self? Yes, yes,
The
yes,
function
yeah,
declaration,
yeah, yeah.
we declare the whole function use.
Exactly. We have piece of code inside function, which gets called immediately. We could have done without the function at all, because anyway we want the function, we want the code to execute immediately, right?
Correct.
But we do this to avoid declaring in global scope.
Okay.
Okay, if you have a variables inside it, that goes inside a function scope, but if you don't have that function, that it goes into the global scope, which is a bad practice.
Okay.
Okay, then comes operators. And again, you would have seen like under, and, or, and not operator. I've used in a lot of places in a lot of different ways, like all the stacked ones. Though, I mean, I would say that it's like a really shorthand operator, okay, in for JavaScript, because in Apex there's a very small difference which makes JavaScript more powerful. Is you can put this operator and or, right, between statements. Okay, in
Yes.
Apex you can put this one between expressions, just as between expressions. You can't put between statements.
Correct.
Okay, when you say statement, when I say statements, semicolon.
Oh
Okay, when
yes.
you put semicolon, it's one statement.
One
You
statement.
can't put and or an or between two statements in Apex, but here you can put between two statements. Okay, so it's very powerful, though it's not a good practice, because it gets more confused for the other developer to go through your code, but um, but it's very powerful in that sense. I've given an example here. Okay, see, if you want to do this sort of thing, this sort of logic, if the object is valid, assign a value from B to A,
Okay.
else assign A as undefined. If you want to do this logic in one liner, you would do like this: A equals object and object B. What does mean is, only if object is valid, it goes here. Otherwise, it simply stops here and assign undefined. Okay, this is a very powerful behavior of JavaScript. If in other programming languages it doesn't, in Apex it doesn't work like that. Okay, that's why you could do this. And also not operator. I've used we can use not operator based on these values. If the variable has these values, it's falsify. If it has anything other than this value, it passes and your code gets executed. Okay, so so you can use not operator on these values, possible values. Then you have two types of equal operators. Okay, two equal and three equal. There is a difference, but not many difference. Luckily, there are only one difference. Two is not strict. Three is very strict in comparison. Okay, this is an example, but it's not just this example. You have other examples, like when you have two objects. Okay, for example, this object has a colon 1,
A
this
colon.
object,
Okay.
and this object also has a colon 1.
Okay.
If you compare it, this two equal will say that both are equal. But if you use three equal, it will say both are different, because even though value is same, these two objects comes from different object. Okay, so it says that it's not equal. Okay, so in that sense, the three object is three equals is a very powerful thing, and normally it's advised, it's a best practice to use always three equals.
Yeah, I saw that
uh,
it has been used.
I've used in some places, yeah, but purposefully I've used double equals in some places as well. Okay, you can see like in what instance I've used this and what instance used, but in general it's good to use three equals in all places. It's safe. Okay, then talk about control statements. You have for loop, the standard JavaScript for loop, and you have for each. Okay,
Yeah,
for each, you know the difference. But I would say, like, when you pick up one among other, I would say you use for loop. Okay, if you know that your for loop gets terminated on the midway. For example, you have 10 elements. If you know that you want to terminate like in the midway, like fourth element or fifth element, depending on the logic, then you use for loop. But for each is not possible. If you want to execute on 10 elements, call each function, you have to call all the functions.
exactly.
You can't stop it on the midway. So on those instances, you normally go with for each. Okay, so that's a basic difference. And do while versus while, you know, probably you know that, no problem. And the try catch, I'm a big fan of try catch. You need to use in so many places. That's a good best practice. So again, there are a lot of Windows APIs available, and you could use it in Lightning component as well. But in my example, but you don't have to use much in Salesforce Lightning purpose, because Salesforce itself handles so many other stuff. Okay, you don't need to do a lot of hacking around URL, and there won't be much page redirection, and you won't do a lot of animations yourself. So that's the reason you don't use much, but still you use like location API and document API to get the element or do something. It's very basic stuff you do normally. And set timeout, clear timeout, you will use in lot of places. And you use onload and on unload. Again, you won't use in Lightning component. You would have used in Visual Force. I would have used in Visual Force. Yeah. Then last slide. So this is my key points, what I keep in mind when I write the JavaScript code as well in terms of coding guidelines. Normally I use function name, whatever is match with what it's doing actually, and I keep the variable name to what it's holding. And at any cost, it shouldn't change the meaning. Okay, if it changes, then your program life is short. Okay, if your program life has to be long, then you need to other with these points. Okay, the third point is function shouldn't exceed one screen size normally. Most of the time, 99% I follow this. Okay, and within functions also, probably would have seen, I've maintained like a different sections, and
Yeah,
each section with its proper comments. That should be thing. And still there are tons of other coding guidelines I follow, but these are the most important thing. Okay, happy coding.